that we clarify this redistricting workshop we're planning to do as to exactly what we expect Mr. Anderson to bring and be prepared to discuss. They are not prepared to discuss elementary schools at this point in time. Are you prepared to discuss middle schools?
We could bring.
And understand, my intention is this meeting is not a end-all meeting. I mean, I anticipate there'll be 3 or 4 workshops that this board will have before we come to some kind of decision.
I think it would be helpful maybe at the first meeting not to look at the maps, but to set a plan, because the numbers for any plan are going to change based on what year you want to implement. And so we could be looking at a plan to implement next year and approve it. I mean, we really need to, maybe the first meeting is to set the plan.
We've gone too far to implement next year. It would have to be year after next now.
So 1920 instead of 2021.
Yes. Because this is April, and I understood March was kind of the drop dead date. Is that not correct?
We could.
Say what?
No, we can't do 1819. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Higgins?
Yeah.
It's too late to do anything for next year. We could look at a plan for the following year, but Ms. Kavanaugh's recommendation was the year after that.
Okay.
So we really need to know what year you would like to implement redistricting so that we can get the numbers correct when we look at the maps.
Well, I clearly think, you know, the year I would suggest that you be looking at is probably 1920. Would everybody agree with that?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I wanted 2021, but I understand I'm in the minority.
All right, 1920 to at least address the middle, potentially middle and high school. But again, I'm not suggesting that we are going to come up with a decision at one meeting. I can envision it's going to take us 4, 5, 6 months to develop this.
When would the decision be implemented? Are you saying it would be implemented in 1920? If so, it's got to be done in 1819, doesn't it?
It's got to be done. It has to be done by March of 19 to be able to be implemented in 1920. And that was the proposed year that the middle schools would. So, I mean, you know, I guess that's the discussion. And that was what I'd be suggesting that you be looking at.
Okay.
And if maybe the best thing for you to do is maybe think about it and tell Ms. Adams how long you think it's going to take to put together something for both the high school and the middle school for us to start looking at. And then based on that, we set the work session.
I would recommend at the first work session that we look at high school and middle school redistricting, you know, as a timeline, as an implementation plan,
Okay.
but we don't look at the maps that first meeting.
Okay.
Because we're also going to be looking at redistricting as an option.
Right.
And we're also going to be looking at modular plans or a combination of the two. We're going to be looking at projects for a future bond referendum.
Sure.
And how they tie into our long-range plans for CTEC, Sidbury, Trask, Laney. So I think maybe that first work session is really a lot of information to set the groundwork for the direction that you decide to go in.
Okay. All right. Is that agreeable to everybody? All right. Ms. Small.
The board has had 2 budget work sessions, and so this is a summary of the items that we would be recommending for the county budget request. Just to sort of remind you of the process, this is for information tonight, but for approval on May 1st as a county request. It's not actually approval of your budget. You won't do that until July. But we need to know how much money the county's going to appropriate before we can finalize the budget. So the request that I'm going to present includes, it's a request for a total of $86.4 million. Of that, $80.9 million would be for New Hanover County Schools. The other would be on behalf of charter and lab schools. The request is based on $2,986 per pupil. We had said $3,000 at our last meeting, but after the meeting, I talked with county staff, and they, on the advice of the local government commission, have asked that we put the pre-K funding, the pre-K grant that we discussed tonight at Mosley, needs to be in our other restricted fund as a grant and not part of our operating budget. We'll still get it, but it's not part of the per pupil funding because the students aren't part of the, the number of students in our K-12 program. So this is still pretty much the same plan that we talked about last time, but the per pupil amount changed. So I wanted to explain that to you. The budget goals that are addressed in the proposal include safety and security, salary and benefit increases, recurring funding for technology, and then inflationary cost increases throughout our program. So with that, I'm going to get started. First of all, the major local budget issues that we are looking at include, as I mentioned, safety and security. Well, I guess I mentioned all those on the last slide, but these are the main things that were discussed at the budget work session. Starting with safety and security, the first of that is being a capital request for $365,000 for access control system upgrades in our high schools. We also looked at, because we're looking at a combination of capital and operating to address these needs, also looking at expanding our day treatment program to high school. We currently have a K-8 program, but this moves it into high school at J.C. Rowe. Looking at the addition of mental health therapists in our schools, increasing the number by 3, requesting for an increase of additional counselors and social workers, 3 additional ones to be assigned based on need. That was discussed, but until we looked at all the numbers, that 3 is what we came up with within the amount of money that you wanted to request. School resource officers, this is more just a statement of support for the sheriff's request to increase the number of SROs in our schools by 6, and also to help pick up the match for the grant that we received from the state for SROs. We also discussed using one-time funds for an updated safety audit. Any questions about safety and security?
What's the dollar amount on the safety audit?
We just budgeted $150,000 just because it was 2013. We'd have to do an RFP and get closer, but that was.
Wasn't that what we spent initially? The
We
150?
spent about 100, and we looked it up, 113,000, somewhere in there, 118,000. I can't remember the exact number, but it was less than that. But it's been a few years, so we thought we better, it would be one-time funds, so we wouldn't, we do an RFP and then we'd come back to you with a contract and an appropriation based on that. The other big issue, one of the other big issues to look at with the budget is the state salary schedules. The state legislature last year approved teacher schedules for this coming year, so we already know, unless they make changes in the short session, that we're looking at an average 6% increase in teachers' schedules because they're raising they're moving teachers to the top of the scale at step 15. Also adjusting the assistant principal schedule to 2% higher than the whole schedule was last year. So the average assistant principal increase would be 7.8% because it's also tied to the teacher scale. And then we are estimating 2% for state raise for other employees. There's been no discussion at the state level yet of what that would look like. I talked with other counties in our region since our last meeting. Most of them are going to budget 3. It's just really too soon to know exactly what's going to happen with the state budget, but ours is based on 2.
May I ask a question? Dr. Markley, with what's been going on in other states with protests and whatever on state salary, Has there been any action in North Carolina?
We're not unionized.
I know we're not unionized.
Well, I mean, they're union states.
North Carolina specifically prohibits that in terms of an action from teachers. But you look at North Carolina, they've increased the beginning pay for teachers every year for the last several years. So they've seen those increases. I would like to see more at the veteran level. I would anticipate I don't anticipate any kind of organized mass kind of protest here.
Good, I was just wondering because it does seem to be growing, and I didn't know if there had been any action in North Carolina. I was hoping that it wasn't.
At this point, there's nothing's, I mean,
They'd be fired?
Probably. Because, I mean, just what he said.
oh, we're not firing teachers.
No, but, wait, you said a union,
That's what
the
you said.
states, West Virginia, Arizona,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, they all have teacher unions. They are unionized.
Okay.
We don't have unions in this
You
state.
can work to the rule in
know
this
that
state.
is-
but
Well,
you
then
can't-
they
But that
could
doesn't
take a
mean
day,
that-
they could take a couple of days off, but, you know, there's nothing like you could have a massive walkout and they go 9, 10, 12 days.
At this point, I've seen
I'm
no.
sorry I
I've seen-
asked the
I've
question.
seen no indication.
Let's let Ms.
But let me ask you a question.
Certainly.
Step 15, is that 15 years?
Yes, sir.
So the pay raises, again, what Dr. Markley said, the veteran teachers are still somewhat being left out? Except what we
Correct. I
give
mean,
them?
last year, they did raise the top of the scale a little bit. It's slightly over 50,000. I can't remember the exact number. This will, in the top of the scale now is at step 25. So with this change next year, the top of the scale would be at step 15. So we'd be moving people to the top more quickly. It'd be less of a range based on longevity. The other emphasis with what the state is doing with pay is more merit pay, more bonuses, those kinds of things. So they're,
And I don't recall, we gave our senior teachers a supplement,
yeah, we have 1 extra % for our teachers above step 25, and
Is
with
that
the new supplement
is that
schedule that
still
we're
in here?
proposing, it is higher at that level as well.
is that still in here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's all I want to know, thank you.
On the local pay schedules, most of them are based on state ranges for the different types of positions. The most significant, issue here to consider is that the board has approved a 5-year plan to kind of correct our non-certified schedules for all the years that there was no increase, because the first 7 years of our scales were flat. And so this would be an additional step that we would be removing from the scale, going from 4 flat steps to 3, combining that, using state money to help pay for that, but it would be an average increase for those folks of 3%. The other item, which is in here as a budget, because the funds would have to be added, but it's also going to be included in an item later on your agenda, because the board wanted to look at it early, was an additional supplement for speech therapists and psychologists, to aid in recruitment and retention of those very hard to fill positions. And so you're actually going to be voting on that tonight for implementation immediately, but the funding for that going forward would be also included in the budget. The total of the salary increases, this is the cost to the local budget of the state salaries increases and the changes to our local scale, would be just over almost $2.2 million. That's a significant item. Next are the benefit increases. Once again, this is based on state legislation, but it affects our local budget. They're increasing the state retirement contribution from 17.13% to 18.44%, which would be $530,000. And then health insurance contribution increasing 4% would cost us $150,000. So this is additional local funds based on the number of local staff we have. We were just discussing the supplement structure. This is a current view of our supplement schedule, which is based on percentages of the state salary schedule. And what we are recommending is that we move to a flat rate schedule, so that when the state makes major changes to the salary schedule, as they've done the last several years, the board would not be obligated to increase supplements. We would go to a flat rate, still taking longevity into effect, but it would, give us a chance to decide if we had funding in our budget before increasing the local supplements. So what we are proposing, which once again, this will be, we're also including this on your agenda tonight for approval because there's no cost. But as we hire teachers, throughout the summer, it would be nice to go ahead and know, what the supplement schedule is going to be, so we don't promise them one thing and then have a different thing. So it's based on experience ranges. There's 5 levels, or 6 levels, excuse me, and there's a base supplement, and then for targeted schools, there is $2,000 additional in each supplement amount. For those teachers, all of these amounts are very similar to what the averages are for each of these ranges now. There would be no cost because we have as teachers are moving from one range to another, we also have teachers retiring. So we base these amounts on, keeping everything flat. 42% of teachers would get an increase. The remainder would be at the same level under this new scale or be grandfathered in. So nobody would lose a supplement amount, but they would not get an increase unless they were moving to one of these new steps.
And then each year, we would review this.
Yes, sir. We bring
in
this as part of the budget
comparison to
process.
what the state's doing, right?
So, of course, anytime you wanted, you could change it, but there wouldn't be this automatic state mandate. When we look at retirement rates and hospitalizations, we also had to look at our supplement schedule because it was based on a percentage of the state scale. And this would just put more control back with you. If we don't do this, the cost that we need to add to our budget request is $510,000. So that was the reason we wanted to change it this year.
This is about putting control of the budget back in our hands on the parts that we do have some control over.
And you can see from Mr. Higgins' earlier question that step, the 20, we have a step for 26 years and above to make sure that even though the state is going to top out at step 15, we're going to continue to have 2 more levels to compensate based on longevity.
And we'll still continue to benchmark this number as it compares to neighboring districts so that we make sure that we're competitive in terms of our hiring practices.
The next item is the technology replacement schedule. We've talked about this for several years because it always comes up in the capital budget, and one of the things that we really need to do is have a consistent revenue stream for technology. We receive some state money, but it's not nearly enough to fund the equipment we need. The schools are also losing the ability to use textbook money for equipment next year. And so we are recommending, based on replacement schedules that's shown in this chart of 7 years for desktops, 5 years for laptops, and 6 years for iPads, that we put that in the operating budget as an annual. We purchase the same number every year, and then over time, it would even out. There's still a little bit left in the capital request for catching up to this point, because for several of our items of equipment are much older than the number of years listed here, so there's still a capital request, but this would be the last time you'd see it in the capital budget once we got this to the operating budget.
I remember when I first got on the board, we were trying to plan for 1 computer for each classroom. Goes to show you how far we've come.
You're correct. And you can see on here, the next slide just shows the age of each of these, because as we've gotten either capital amounts or different funding sources for computers, we have purchased very inconsistent numbers of equipment each year, and it makes it very hard to keep it up and running. So that was just to sort of show you the need for a consistent revenue stream. Questions on that? Expansion requests that we looked at, one item was to, we have several, well, let me mention this first. There's 16 positions that are requested, but we're also going to be cutting positions later in the budget, so it's a net reduction of positions. But 6 positions that would be expansion are mostly at the school level. There's a few central office that are needed, but that totals almost $1.2 million for these 16 positions. In addition, there were several items that were funded in last year's budget from fund balance appropriation that need to be in the continuation budget. The computer system replacement schedule is listed here, as well as a cost increases across several different departments and areas of the budget, but the most significant parts of those include increases for utilities and some cost increases for insurance and maintenance contracts. So the total of all that's $800,000, and this entire section would be $3.4 million. Questions on the expansion request? And the detail of this will be on our website. This is the summary, but there's a detailed document that goes through each of these line items where you can see what department they would be in.
Can you go back for just a second? What is the, just in brief, what's the detail on the high school support for CCP?
Which one was that?
For Career and College Promise?
That was, this is a state-funded program that allows dual enrollment. So you're taking college classes and getting high school credit and college credit at the same time, but
Yeah, I know what it
the
is,
state
but
does
I'm
not
saying-
provide any funds for the transportation and some of the college fees.
Okay, that's right.
And so this helps kids who may not have the opportunity to participate to also be able to participate.
Right, okay. So are we going to actually, is that just like the kind of the overhead support to pay for like the bus drivers and stuff? Or are we actually gonna like try to purchase a separate bus, or what are we gonna do with that? Do we have an idea on the?
It's basically just used as bus driver support
Okay.
and the fees for us.
Okay.
The tuition's covered through the program, so it's
Right.
for us, it's an expense, but it's a whole lot less than the actual cost of trying to conduct one of those classes.
Right.
And the question you've asked about in the past, I understand the community colleges finally has posted and is moving forward on their 2 positions.
They have, yep.
We also discussed formula changes. There's been a large state issue for several years as we approach the K-3 class size reduction in the in House Bill 90 that has been now phased over 4 years. So we are proposing our formula changes of how we'd implement that in our county. We'd already partially implemented it, but we needed the board's approval of the changes we would make each year as they increase funding for enhancement positions. And so that is part of the plan. You can see it a little bit better on this slide where you can see the actual formulas by grade every year. The only change for next year would actually be in grades 4 and 5, because part of what we had done is we had increased class size in grades 4 and 5 to help pay for the K-3 earlier, so we want to get them back to the state formula. So that would be the only change in the first year. There was also some decisions the board made last year related to some formula changes, and I'll ask that we come back and discuss those again. The recommendation for the change that was made last year was that in-school suspension teachers in middle and high school would be changed from certified to non-certified through attrition. And so the change is to let middle schools keep those at the certified level. High schools were supposed to lose their non-certified graduation coaches, and so the recommended change to that is to allow them to replace them through attrition, but with a certified position. So that their priority for the certified position was for graduation coaches and not ISS. Questions on that? Other local planning issues, I mentioned before there's some repurposed budget savings with Virgo closing. It's very hard to estimate the actual budget savings to that until we know what the enrollment for Virgo will be, because with students moving to Virgo, we're losing state and local funding associated with those students. And so we projected that just based on the number they're projecting, but in the final budget we'll have a much better number of what that savings will be. But we know that the 37 positions we currently have in the budget that are for Virgo positions will be moved to other schools or incorporated into the budget. So we know that.
And we'll save money there, like you say, because we're spending more than we're receiving, correct?
Right, so the savings that you see here is not the whole amount of the 37 positions, but this is the amount that we were spending above. So we're
Yeah,
losing
the
the
amount
state and
we were
local
spending per
funding, but
student.
say again?
Then the amount we were spending per student based upon other schools, this was quite a bit higher.
With state and local funding, we were receiving
What's it, 9,000?
around 9,000, and we were spending 16.
Yeah.
And so that difference is what's represented in the savings. In addition to that, y'all you approved last year a 2-year phase-in of getting away from having non-certified tech assistants and having that be managed through positions in the technology department. So this is the second phase of that, which eliminates 12 of those and reduces 1 middle school virtual academy coordinator as we change the way we offer that program in middle schools. And then for some additional costs that we have is that the early college funding, the state has reduced the grant over 2 years, and so we're going to lose $40,000 there that we need to make up. Skip one. And then charter schools, as their enrollment has grown over the last several years, we've been funding that with fund balance appropriation. Basically, we would find out about their growth after our budget was approved, and we would appropriate fund balance to balance everything. So we need to get those two things aligned. So we have to reappropriate that on a permanent way. The one I skipped was local teachers. I mentioned with the state formula changes that the state would be giving us additional enhancement positions for art, music, and PE, and we would get 16 of those the first year. We partially use that to deal with the grade 4 and 5 formula change, because these are positions we already have. We don't need to hire new art, music, and PE teachers. We're just sort of reimbursing local for the positions we were paying for local. But we'd also save 9 teaching positions that we could use to fund those other teachers that I mentioned on the expansion slide. The net of all this is a savings of about $438,000. Also, there were 3 one-time items listed. We already mentioned the safety audit, but also a contribution for some tennis court renovations at Ashley that would be the funding shared between the county, the school system, and the tennis association. And then the existing conditions assessment for our long-range planning, that is put as a one-time item because it's not something we do every year. So the summary of the recommendations that we're proposing, net of the budget savings, total $6,935,871. Sorry, it's hard to see. And so that is, you know, what that's the number that we used to base how much we were requesting from the county. We also, on a per pupil rate, that comes up to the $2,986 that I mentioned to you. Our current funding per pupil is $2,700, so it's quite an increase. The justification for that, in addition to the priority needs, is also the inflationary cost that have happened in the year since we set the $2,700. You may remember the $2,700 is what we were funded per pupil back in 2008 and 2009 before we lost funding due to the economy. So we had the goal to get back to $2,700, which we did, but we've had a lot of cost increases since then, as well as more that we're expecting for next year. So
You have an expected number though too, correct?
say again.
You have an expected rate, not, I mean, I know ideally you'd want to get the 2986, but
Yeah, that's just a number that was just based on what the needs are. So that would be the proposed request. We have no idea what the amount of appropriation would be. So that
Process-wise, this will be, our budget hearing will be next week. We will next month, we'll tentatively approve the budget. The county then will take our recommendations, they'll look at it, they'll make their appropriation, and we'll have to have another adjustment at the June meeting.
Just 2 more quick slides. One shows that, and let me mention on this slide, the current year appropriation, it says excluding pre-K, that was based on the issue I told you about before. We didn't want to show the increase twice, which is why that's backed out, but they are still planning to fund it. The county, this chart, and I won't go into the detail, but the importance of this chart is it separates what we're requesting on our behalf with our projected numbers versus what the projected growth is for the lab school and the other charter schools. So all of that we actually have to request on their behalf, and that's why it's listed on this chart. So, you know,
One of the reasons we asked at the legislative luncheon that charter school appropriations really need to go to the charter schools. They're public schools. For us to be the middleman for that process, I think creates some potential adversarial situations that don't benefit either party.
is there, and I know we've talked about this before for charter schools, after the 30 days and the kids come back, has there ever been any talk about sending the money back. I know what you're saying, because if you send it directly to the charter schools, then you eliminate that issue.
What happens with charter school funding is they actually have, their funding is checked twice. After the first 20 days is when they get their first check for their enrollment on day 20.
Right.
Then they do a second check in February on their enrollment, and they make an adjustment. The problem becomes is if between day 20 and day about 90, when they send those back, those kids are coming back to us, and we're not getting those revenues for those students. And in most cases with charter schools, you enroll one time. With public schools, we're an in and out kind of process. We have kids coming and we have kids going, and so it's frustrating for us is that we write a large check, and then I think this year alone we've had over 80 students come back to us from charter schools after we had written checks to the school.
And an important thing to add to that is the state assumes in the current formula that if charter schools grew, they grew from enrollment coming from us, but they may have come from homeschools or private schools, but any increase that they have in their enrollment beyond what was projected is reduced from our budget, even if our enrollment went up as well. When they do the shore up to them in the spring, they do not make an adjustment back to us. So they look at theirs twice, they look at ours once. So we're just asking, statewide for those formulas to be consistent and treat them the same way that
And it's going to be interesting this year, as I watch in the lab school, they're pulling in students from our schools, as you would expect, Virgo students, but they're also pulling in students from several of the charter schools. So what their number, it's going to be, we're going to have to, those first 20-day numbers are going to be very interesting as we roll into the fall this year.
And one of the things to mention with our, in case you happen to see anywhere, the state projection for us, the growth numbers that we included in the budget are a little bit less than the state projection because we anticipate, that the state doesn't know yet about the Virgo change, in their projections for us, and so we don't want to get hit with that later, so we went ahead and planned on that adjustment early on. So if you happen to see that number anywhere, that's the reason why ours is a little bit less.
Make sure I'm clear on something. When do we send the money to the charter schools for the numbers that they have of our students?
On the 20th day of school, we look at our numbers and their numbers, and we take the county money and we divide it evenly per pupil, and that's the number we use for the rest of the year. So even if their enrollment drops, we have to consistently apply that number because our enrollment could go up or down too. So based on agreement that was reached several years ago, the state has said this, you need to have a set date that you determine how you're going to share
But
that.
if they come back, say on day 20, we send them the money, day 21.
We don't get the money back.
If they happen to come back, our funding is adjusted in December based on best 1 and 2. So if they happen to come back in the first 2 months, conceivably we could get some of it back, but if they come back in the third month, we would not.
And see, the state a charter school gets their state money up front. They don't get their local money up front until day 20. And that's based on the projection. And that's the number they adjust in February is their state dollars, not the local dollars.
And we give them the local dollars monthly, but it's still based on that magic 20th day number. Anyway, this last slide is just a summary that's the same as what's included on your cover sheet, which is technically what we'd be asking you to approve as the county request at your next meeting. So once again, I'll just mention the attachment has the detailed capital projects that we're proposing, and as well as the detailed line items in the operating budget. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
So do you need any kind of action from us?
No, sir, it won't be considered for approval until your next meeting, which I believe is on May 1st.
Yeah, we will, at the May meeting, we'll do our statutory budget hearing. So when we have our public comment period, we'll extend that and include a period for comment from the public as it relates to the budget.
All right. I just saw it was on for new business.
Well, it's the first time it's come to the formal board meeting.
Okay.
It's been at 2 work sessions prior.
But with the charter lab school appropriation, is that just a guess, a good
Yes, sir.
educated guess?
That is me basing the estimate based on their projected enrollment, because we've been working with them to plan that. So they were planning based on 250, so that's what we did. We'll do our final budget we'll know their enrollment number that's just for the lab school. The charter school is based on the numbers each charter school gave me for their projection for next year.
This is all charter schools in the surrounding areas.
It's anybody that we send students
Yeah,
that,
it's every charter school where the student lives in New Hanover County.
Right.
So the student could be attending in Brunswick or Pender or somewhere else, but it's where the student lives that the county money flows to. So we send, I can't remember, I think it's about 10 different charter schools that we send money to, but a little over half are in our county, but the others are
in county, you've got CFCI, you've got Wilmington Prep, you've got the Montessori School, you have Glow,
Douglas.
you have Douglas Academy, and you have the new one that opened up near the Pender line.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Embedded in all of this is some reaction on our part from a safety perspective. So if you look at the 6, I believe it was 6 SROs, I don't know, that's probably 400,000. And then if you look at some of the other items that are in there, I think, my opinion, as we send this budget, assuming it were to pass like it is, to the county commissioners, and you're asking for $6.9 million from them, then I think you need to break that down and say how much of that increase is going to charter, how much of that increase is going to safety-related items. And I think it will make it easier for them when they look at it to understand some of this is an appropriate community reaction to tragedy. And I think it might help them to evaluate it.
Certainly. We had the words and the numbers, they just weren't together, so we'll make sure that that's realigned. I will mention that the SROs are not actually in this proposal. We're supporting that proposal, but that would come from the sheriff's.
And then I think the other thing is, if I'm not mistaken, we've reduced our available fund balance, our spendable fund balance, to about 6%.
That's
And
correct.
we need to,
Just
I
slightly
think,
over 6%.
in your conveyance to them, that needs to be pointed out that we're at the bottom. Because the county's inclination is to say, well, you can share in some of this increase by pulling from fund balance. And if I'm not mistaken, we were, what, 9–10% 3 years ago? Maybe more. And we've spent it down. But if we go below, just me, I'm just one, but if we go below that, I think we're putting ourselves at peril with hurricane season.
Okay. We will definitely include both of those things. Any other suggestions or changes the board?
I like what Bruce said about breaking it up between safety and charter and all that stuff, but my question would be, is there any way that we can actually apportion, if they were to approve X amount for safety, X amount for charter? How do we ensure that that X amount for
You mean
safety
set
actually goes?
priorities?
They
on
don't
what
actually, they
approve?
don't actually get to approve.
No, I
the
understand, I
charter
understand that.
number.
We just, yeah.
I mean, that's gonna be whatever it is, that's the charter share.
Okay.
Now, the safety piece, we could separate that out as a, not as a line item, but as something akin to that.
One of the things that we, excuse me.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things we did in the detail, which is hard to tell for the presentation, is each of those sections was prioritized, priority 1, 2, and 3. So we can sort of let them know, what our highest priorities are within that as we present. But most things were still priority 1, but we could indicate for them what percentage of that per pupil increase was priority 1, 2, and 3.
But I think it is a good idea, as you said, with the charter money, to emphasize the fact that that's money that we receive that then goes out.
And that's the reason on this slide it's shown separately. So there's a New Hanover County request in total, and then New Hanover County Schools, just so they can see.
Well, to me, it's the increase that they need to see.
Right, which is in that
Right.
center column, but we can do that at a more detailed level, certainly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, professional development systems, schools, university partnership, Appendix J. Dr. Markle.
This is our renewal of our agreement with the university. It allows them to place student teachers in our school, as well as some other professional development opportunities. Summer Lewis from UNCW is here, so if there are particular questions you have about this agreement, she can help me answer those. But they're a great partner, folks. A lot of
Anything
our
changed?
teachers, what?
Anything changed from the last?
No. I would recommend for approval.
Move for approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion?
Now, again, just reiterate the strong partnership that we have with UNCW.
Is there anything you'd like to say at the podium? Okay.
You have nothing to do with rental of facilities, do you?
Okay, if you read the Virgo lease, we've covered that.
I want to make some money on this thing. We need the money.
About how many student teachers did we place last year?
Several hundred.
The 16-17 academic year, we placed 196 student teachers, but that doesn't include the over 2,500 field experience students who also filtered through the schools.
How many of those teachers, of those 196 student teachers, actually ended up in New Hanover County? Do we know?
At least half.
Yeah.
Robin, UNCW teachers, how many are we averaging per year? Yeah. Robin Myers does all the hiring for us.
Do you have a division between elementary, middle, high?
If there's one complaint that I have with UNCW, is they could produce more high school teachers and middle school teachers.
As a former high school teacher, I agree.
Well, I was gonna say, like, when we
Absolutely.
were.
The vast
you know,
majority of those are
scholarship-
elementary.
Well, the scholarship, the participants, it was about 75, possibly 100% that were elementary school,
Yep.
wanting to be elementary school teachers.
Yeah.
So, I was just wondering if you see the trend as well at UNCW.
Yeah, absolutely. Our elementary program by far is the largest in terms of the teachers that we put into our systems. Middle is one of our smaller. Secondary is actually growing, and we're looking at an uptick next year in our undergraduate numbers. We've been really lucky with our master's program. Our MAT cohorts have been really strong and continue to grow, so we're hoping to produce more teachers with master's degrees as well.
How about special ed?
Special ed numbers are still low, but we're really trying to recruit in those areas. We're happy that we just hired a new recruiter just for our educator prep programs, as well as also our higher ed program, and he's working with each of the high schools in the area as well as across the region, has contacts in each of the schools, middle schools as well, to help grow those numbers.
Just kind of off topic, but I know the difference between elementary, middle, and high schools. Is there something as a school system we could do, I know, to promote middle high school? I don't know if there's,
Middle and high school is tough. The states are a 25% drop in enrollment in schools of ed across the state over the last couple of years, a lot of it related to pay. And middle and high school took the biggest hit of that number. Their numbers going up is really bucking the trend. But when you're a math and science person and the economy is at 4% unemployment, then if you've got any skills in those areas, you can probably do better in the private sector than working with us. It's an area you'll notice we probably have a lot more lateral entry than we've ever had in the past in our high school areas. And so we're seeing, that's the one area where we're making it up. We are working with we agreed to work with a new company to do some recruiting around hard to staff areas. So there's some private groups out there we're trying to work with as well.
Are we doing anything, see, the certification still limits the middle school assignment of teachers, because if you have an elementary, then you can't go past sixth grade.
Yeah, we've tried to work with the legislatures around licensing. What we're finding, one of the struggles we find when it comes to licensure is you could be a certified teacher in another state, come to us, and we're gonna force you to take 3 or 4 praxis tests, which makes no sense to me, because we have different cutoff scores for those. I can take my driver's license, walk across the state line to Virginia, and they're gonna hand me a Virginia driver's license. Why we can't simply say, you've got a license, come teach for us, we'll give you a 1-year contract, at the end of the 1 year, if you can't teach, thanks for coming with us. But it's frustrating to see that, and Robin deals with this every day in terms of the licensure. Well, I can be happy to probably in one of our future meetings to have her talk about that whole licensure process.
That would be helpful.
Well, all 4 of those students that we gave scholarships to, aren't they elementary teachers?
Well, one,
one
he
was
said either high
high school
school
or
or elementary.
yeah.
I guess it depends on the course, how you, they get to you, that you say, oh, no, you can teach math at the high
Well, he was,
school or
he was going
science.
to UNCW.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
those
he's-
conversations oftentimes have to happen individually with the faculty members that they meet early on. I think our teacher recruiter getting in and talking to them early is important. Also our advisors that we have within the college as well. Several of our courses are also offered during their undergraduate years, their first and second year, so we're transitioning them in a little bit earlier to the College of Ed in terms of when they're accepted. So I just think the earlier we could get to them and also get them in schools, the better.
One
And the
last
more
question.
informed they are.
Minority students, minority student teachers?
We are still working very hard to recruit minorities into the profession, just as everybody is across the state.
If you look at our system as a whole, at our administrative level, our teacher assistant level, our classified levels, our demographics match the county. The one area we don't is in teaching. And that's an issue for every district across the state. HBCUs are not producing education graduates. It's a minority students who's got good math and science grades. Oftentimes industry, even if they're education majors, industry will come in and offer them a much higher salary to go directly in industry. It's tough to recruit, so that's one of the reasons why our school, we're doing a couple of things for that. Our Isaac Baird program, we've opened up some slots for kids who want to be future teachers, get them into those programs early. One of the reasons why we're doing teaching fellows, if they're our own students, they'll come back and stay with us. So that's one thing we're looking at. We're also looking at, for our students who are in STAY, which is a program for students who we're trying to push to go to college. We're gonna promise them if they go into education, graduate with a clear teaching license, they can come back and work for us. We're gonna be bringing that to you guys for approval probably in May or June. We're working on the final details for that.
All right, I'll have a motion. Did I get a second? Yes. I did, okay.
Yeah, I do.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of this
Motion.
professional development arrangement, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next item. Local salary supplement schedule, Appendix K, Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think both of the next two have been pretty well discussed before, but just wanted to make a recommendation, as Dr. Markley and Mary Hazel and, of course, Ms. Askew have pointed out, that we're having a difficult time and hard-to-fill positions in special ed. These are the two school psychologists and speech pathologists that are currently just becoming very difficult, and we would like to add these to our supplement schedule with a $2,000 supplement, which would be enacted as soon as we can, and then begin that through the recruitment process this summer. We'd like
Move for approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any questions or discussion?
It's not gonna create any internal, equity issues.
Don't think so, no. I think most people realize that.
It'll apply to our current folks, so this isn't something that's just for new folks, so they'll receive the benefit of this. We're already, Julie, how many vacancies do we currently have?
6.
We have 6 vacancies, so this is obviously a hard-to-staff position.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Next item, flat rate teacher supplement, Appendix L, Dr. Welmers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Hazel and Dr. Markley have both done a very good job of summarizing this. This was first discussed by the Compensation Review Committee, the ad hoc committee, at the first of the school year, where we were looking at a flat rate, which gave us a little bit more control and budgeting issues, and also supported some of our more senior teachers in a positive way. So that's where we are now. I'd like to recommend that we implement the flat rate proposal.
Move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I had asked, and I don't see it here, that you list the target schools in case anybody had a question about that.
On the third slide, if we
Yeah.
go one more. Just one more time. It lists the targeted schools as Freeman,
Okay.
Snipes, Virgo, Williston, J.C. Rowe, and Lake Forest.
Down at the bottom.
Okay.
Item number 4 under the,
Right, yeah. I just want to, in case anybody had a question about what were the target schools that were getting extra funds.
And what are the guidelines there as far as length of time? Because I know there's, I think in the policy, isn't it new that if you're a teacher at a school and you've been there, less than 3 years, you cannot transfer?
That's correct.
How does that affect the supplement if I'm at a target school my first year? That would cover them too, correct?
Right, that's correct.
it's
Okay.
for people who are employed at that school.
Right. Part of the idea of the supplement is that you would recruit into that school using the supplement as leverage.
Any other questions? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. All right. Next item's correspondence. Anybody got any correspondence they want to share? Hearing none. Moving on. Announcements. First announcement, just to remind you that the Martin Luther King commemoratory event is scheduled for Wednesday, tomorrow, April the 4th, 2018. Doors open at 5:30. Music begins at 5:45, and event starts promptly, and they emphasized that today, at 6:30.
It says 6 o'clock on here.
I know it says 6 o'clock, but it's 6:30. And it will be in the gym, but if there is an overflow crowd, they have a big screen set up in the auditorium that people can watch it.
And folks, the reason why it's happening at Williston, and for those who don't know, is Martin Luther King was actually scheduled to speak here at Williston instead of Memphis, but at the last minute made a change in his plans and instead went to Memphis. It's one of those what-if kind of events historically that you wonder what would have happened.
That's right. And it's from 6:30 to 8 is the time. The next regular meeting of New Hanover County Board of Education will be on Tuesday, May the 1st, 2018 at 5:30 in the BOE Center, 1805 South 13th Street. Is there anything else to come before this board?
I move we adjourn.
Have a motion to
Second.
adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Just before you vote, remind you, you're gonna get a date for redistricting, so please get that back to her as quickly as possible so we can establish that and get the information. We've gotten a lot of things thrown out that you wanted to discuss at that meeting. Please send to Tabitha as well, just so we make sure we cover everything. What you think we need to cover in that work session.
Okay. All right, have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adjournment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.